That was the term they used. Clean, efficient, devoid of emotion. It was 9 a.m. on a Monday when I was summoned to a brief check-in with HR and the VP of Operations. 32 minutes later, I walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box and a severance folder labeled Voluntary Transition Support Package. My name is Adrian Vu, and until that morning, I was the Senior Systems Reliability Engineer at HelixNet, a mid-sized but fast-scaling SaaS company known for its sleek UI and bold marketing. Internally, though, it ran on fragile systems, duct-taped patches, and tribal knowledge. Much of that tribal knowledge had lived inside my head. 8 years, that's how long I'd been there. 8 years of building the core infrastructure from scratch, keeping services alive through data migrations, third-party API failures, even a cyber attack that no one outside our internal Slack ever found out about. But now I was non-essential. The person who delivered the news was Clive, the new VP brought in 6 months ago from some glossy firm that prided itself on running lean and agile. He didn't even know what half my job involved. He just saw a line item marked $168,000 per year and flagged it as optimizable. The automation tools you set up are quite robust, he said, nodding as if reading a compliment off a cue card. Between those and our new MSP support team in Singapore, we think we're covered. I stared at him. Do you know what the multi-tenant sync jobs do every night? Clive blinked. I assume that's part of the ETL pipeline? No, I said flatly. It's the process that reconciles client data between isolated nodes, prevents data drift, and corrects sync latency. It's the reason our billing logs match our usage reports. He nodded slowly, clearly not absorbing a word. I'm sure the team will handle it. The team, as he called it, was 2 junior IT staff, a part-time DevOps contractor, and a Slack bot someone had set up to reply looking into it when an alert fired. I wasn't angry. Not immediately. I was numb. The office felt sterile as I made my way to my desk. A few coworkers peeked out from cubicles with wary expressions, but no one said anything. Maybe they didn't know yet. Maybe they were afraid it was contagious. I sat down and opened my terminal one last time. The server dashboard was clean, uptime green across the board. I'd written a maintenance script to sweep and reindex every database cluster every Sunday night. It had run like clockwork for years. No one even knew it existed. I typed out one final message to my team in the number Infra Slack channel. Today is my last day at Helix. I've documented key processes in the internal wiki. If anything goes sideways in the next few weeks, check the /legacy folder. It has notes on failover behavior and rollback edge cases. Good luck and take care. No one replied, but I saw the eyes emoji pop up from our new junior engineer, Lucas. He'd asked me last week how the reverse proxy handled fail overload. I'd started to explain, and he said, I'll read the docs. There were no docs. On my way out, I passed the display in the front lobby, sleek posters celebrating our 99.99% uptime, client logos, and a framed article titled, How HelixNet Built Bulletproof Infrastructure. I had written the quote in that article. The reporter asked how we'd scaled so fast with such low downtime. I'd said, we invest early in reliability so our users never have to notice we exist. They liked that line so much they printed it on mugs. No one offered me one as a goodbye gift. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a beer watching traffic crawl across the 520 bridge. I thought about the thousands of daily users who depended on HelixNet to track shipments, invoices, support tickets. And I thought about the little cracks I knew were forming, data inconsistencies, config drift, slow cron cycles creeping toward thresholds. The thing about infrastructure? It doesn't break loud. It breaks quietly, slowly, while everyone's looking at the flashy product updates and OKR charts. And by the time anyone notices, it's already broken. 2 days later, I got a text from Lucas. Hey, weird question. Do you remember where the memcached flush command lives? Can't find it in any of the wikis. I stared at the screen, then typed, "There's no flush command. It rotates automatically via temp cron on the admin node. If you manually flush it, you'll kill session persistence." A beat later. "Oh, I may have done that." I didn't respond. I just closed the message. On Friday, I received my final paycheck. Direct deposit, no call, no note. Just a number on a screen and an automated HR email with the subject line, "Transition complete." But as I stared at my monitor that night, news feeds silent, job boards full of vague recruiter promises, I couldn't shake the thought that something was coming. Something only I could see. Because it was my system, and I knew its limits better than anyone. The day after my last paycheck, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk with no destination, no monitoring dashboards in my pocket, no Slack alerts whispering like ghosts through my phone, no emergency pings from engineers pretending a system crash was just a hiccup. It felt unnatural. 8 years of invisible vigilance doesn't just shut off when you hand in your badge. I had left behind documentation, of course, as much as I could in the final hours I had. But documentation only works if someone reads it, understands it, and knows when to apply it. Most of what I wrote wasn't even in the main wiki. There were too many edge cases, too many conditional triggers I'd never fully explained, because they weren't meant to be handled by a rotating cast of junior engineers or a sleepy outsourced team in a different time zone. They were meant for me. The person who built the failover logic during a Red Bull-fueled weekend when AWS glitched and none of the backup scripts deployed properly. The person who layered redundancies for a client who didn't technically require them, because I didn't like the word probably when it came to data. That person had now been labeled non-essential, and that person had walked out the door. A week after I left, I got another text from Lucas. "Quick Q. What's the difference between rollbackstaging.sh and rollback-to-prod.sh?" I paused. That was a landmine. Those scripts weren't just different, they were opposites. The staging rollback preserved log states. The production rollback erased active session IDs and regenerated salts. Mixing them up meant resetting every logged-in user across the platform and invalidating live tokens. So I wrote carefully, "Don't touch either. Staging rollback is safe, but only if you're rolling from a canary deploy. Prod rollback wipes session data and reboots container state. Use only if failure occurs at code level after deploy but before token propagation." "Oh, did you already run one?" "No, just checking." Ha ha ha. I hoped the emoji was true. Later that day, I opened my personal drive and stared at the folder I wasn't supposed to have. Legacy failsafes.zip. It wasn't company data, not exactly. It was my own architecture diagrams, flowcharts, annotations I had created over the years to understand how the pieces fit together. The glue no one ever sees. The dependencies people forget exist until something snaps. It wasn't out of spite that I kept it. It was instinct. You don't abandon your creation when you know it's vulnerable. That night, I got a call from Jonas, one of the old back-end engineers who had jumped ship 2 years ago to join a crypto startup. "You really gone?" he asked. Officially, severance and all." He chuckled dryly. "You were the only reason half of that system didn't melt." "Apparently they have automation now." "They have a ticking time bomb, no offense." "None taken." He was quiet for a moment. "You see the incident from last night?" I frowned. "What incident?" "Minor thing. Took the reporting dashboard down for 4 hours. Couldn't fetch metrics. I checked the public logs. Looked like a memory leak from one of the scheduler containers." Scheduler container? I knew that service. It used to depend on time-stamped temp files, stored in RAM for speed but wiped clean every time a manual pod restart was issued. Unless you flagged the rollback, which Lucas probably hadn't. "Did they fix it?" "Eventually. but the cached reports were corrupted. I heard they had to backfill all of yesterday's client analytics. And they will again, every time that pattern hits. Jonas didn't answer. Because he knew, because I'd warned them. A week later, I received a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't recognize. Nadia from the product ops team. Hey, Adrian, not sure if you remember me. We met once during an internal roadmap summit. I was wondering, would you be open to a quick call, off the record, about something weird happening in our logs? I hesitated. It wasn't my job anymore. I didn't owe them anything. But curiosity and maybe pride got the better of me. We spoke the next morning. First off, I'm sorry about what happened, she said. You should still be here. Appreciate that, I replied. She explained that the system had started acting strange after a routine update pushed by the MSP team. Timeouts spiking, retries looping more than they should, and then a weird event where the internal queue stopped processing for exactly 212 seconds. I didn't even need to ask. Is it always 212 seconds? Yeah, exactly that, every time. I nodded. That's the watchdog interval for the old heartbeat demon. If the cache layer isn't responding, it waits 212 seconds before dumping logs and restarting the process. But we don't use that anymore. I smiled grimly. Unless someone re-enabled it accidentally or never removed the legacy flag. She was silent for a moment. What should I tell them? I paused. You don't owe me anything, but if you want to keep things stable, tell them to check for Demon Watchdog flag equals true in the deployment template. If it's there and you're running the new queuing system, remove it. Thank you, Adrian. For what it's worth, I added, I really hope none of the client nodes hit trigger level. Why? Because if they do, the failover will kick in, and no one left knows how to reverse it manually. I hung up and felt a chill, because now I knew it wasn't a question of if something would break. It was only when, and I'd left behind just enough breadcrumbs that they might reach out again. But probably too few to stop what was already set in motion. It started with a ticket, INC 4271. Client reports intermittent timeout accessing live reporting dashboard, filed at 3:04 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. A quiet ripple, nothing alarming, not yet. I wasn't supposed to know about it, my internal accounts had long since been deactivated, but someone forwarded me a screenshot of the JIRA entry via Signal. Grace, one of the few engineers still at HelixNet who remembered how things used to work. She hadn't spoken to me since the day I walked out. Her message was brief. Think this is a fluke? Or the beginning? I stared at the screenshot for a long time. The symptoms were familiar. Timeouts on live dashboards usually traced back to memory pressure in the streaming analytics module. The one we rewrote in Go after the original version kept choking on malformed event data from Europe. But more importantly, the fact that it was happening at 3 a.m. told me something else. That was when the batch export job started, dumping hourly usage snapshots to the regional failover cluster. And if that job wasn't throttled properly, it could strangle the upstream metrics pipeline. Just like it had before, in 2020, when we expanded to Southeast Asia without scaling our ingestion layer. I tapped a reply. Check the export job logs. If you see spike retries at 3:02 followed by failed compression at 3:03, they're overloading the feed. Patch it by splitting export into 3-minute chunks instead of one 10-minute batch. Grace replied 10 minutes later, Holy shit, that's exactly what happened. 3 hours later, I received another Signal message. This time from Marcos, a mid-tier sysadmin I barely knew. Hey, not sure who else to ask. Do you remember why the EU log pipeline has a delay if uncertain rule on IP attribution? I stared at the words. That rule. I hadn't thought about it in years. It had been a compliance tweak we'd added during GDPR implementation, causing the system to delay region-based attribution if the source IP was too ambiguous. VPNs, masked proxies, or malformed headers. It was a safeguard designed to delay action until further confirmation. But here's the kicker. If it timed out 3 times in a row, it shut down attribution entirely. A bug never resolved, because I had been the only one who knew how to patch it with a soft bypass. And I'd added a note in my own file. Fix if system gets re-architected. Until then, apply at your own risk. Marcos's follow-up came quickly. Client reports their EU dashboards are blank. No regional data since last night. I didn't reply, I just stared at my monitor. The first hairline fractures were forming. By the weekend, the glitches were multiplying. A second client reported invoice duplication. A third complained that their user counts had dropped by 23% overnight. A fourth, a large logistics firm in Germany, said their scheduled reports had arrived time-stamped 3 hours into the future. Every one of those symptoms pointed to the same root issue, data sync instability. And I knew why. The multi-tenant sync engine I had built was modular but also sensitive. It had been designed to keep client environments isolated, sandbox to protect from cross-tenant bleed, but it also relied on a delicate timing web. That web was never meant to be updated piecemeal, but that's what they were doing. A junior DevOps admin, fresh from training, had been instructed to modernize the job scheduler. And in doing so, they'd removed the inter-job dependency checkers. I found the git commit on a public mirror someone forgot to disable. The commit message: removing legacy job triggers, clean slate. I almost laughed. They'd deleted the thing holding the system together. The final sign came Sunday night. A 503 error began displaying intermittently on HelixNet's login page. At first, users assumed it was their Wi-Fi or maybe Chrome acting up, but then the tweets began to surface. Anyone else getting weird errors trying to log into HelixNet? My HelixNet dashboard is blank. Refreshing doesn't help. Anyone? Just lost access mid-report. Anyone got support contact? And finally, is it HelixNet down or is it just me? I checked the HelixNet status page. All green, of course, because the status page was static. It required a manual toggle from an internal admin to show real-time updates, something only 2 people used to know. I had been one, the other. Gone 2 quarters ago. By midnight, users had flooded the subreddit with outage reports. I scrolled in silence, a familiar pressure building in my chest. It was happening. The thing I'd feared, the thing I'd predicted. And not because the system was malicious or because someone sabotaged it, but because they didn't understand the house they were renovating. They ripped out a load-bearing wall because it didn't look important. And now, the roof was sagging. The next morning, I received a call. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail, and it was Clive, the VP who had laid me off. His voice was tired, frayed. Adrian, look, I know we didn't part on great terms, but we're dealing with some unexpected challenges right now. We could use your insight. Can we talk? I didn't answer, not yet, because I knew something he didn't. The real failure hadn't even started. This was just the tremor. The quake was coming. By noon that Monday, HelixNet was in free fall. The login issues had evolved into a full-blown authentication failure. Users couldn't sign in. Active sessions were dropping. API calls were returning malformed responses or timing out entirely. Clients began reporting cascading errors in their internal dashboards, most of them unaware that the issue wasn't with their software, but HelixNet's backend. Internally, chaos had erupted. Grace messaged me again, this time without preamble. They've completely lost the session management layer. Lucas tried a manual flush and killed every live container. They're flying blind. That flush command, the same one he'd asked me about weeks ago, the one I'd warned him could obliterate session persistence, they'd run it, probably in desperation. Probably without realizing that the command didn't just clear session tokens, it reset the salt keys. That meant every encrypted session token in the system was now invalid. Without reauthentication, no one could log in. And the reauthentication layer, that was still tied to a deprecated service I'd never been allowed to rebuild because it was good enough for now. I scrolled the incident timeline someone had leaked on a private DevOps forum. 0908, internal dashboard loads fail. 0914, API gateway begins rejecting auth tokens. 0926, container restart initiated. 0937, Redis cluster timeout. 0942, full client login outage. 1006, HelixNet status page updated manually. Investigating issue. That last line made me wince. Investigating. That word meant they were lost. By 1 p.m., I received another call, this time from a real number. It was Nadia from Product Ops. "Adrian, it's bad," she said. I figured. We've got dozens of enterprise clients screaming at us. No one can generate invoices, approve workflows, or even log in. The DevOps contractors are saying it's a Redis fault, but it's not Redis, I cut in. It's session salt corruption. Your container flush nuked the keyring. There was silence on the other end. How do you know that? Because I designed the original system. Another beat of silence. Clive wants to talk to you. Let me guess, he's in a war room? Hasn't left it in 6 hours. There's a whiteboard with 3 action items. Reboot, rollback, or rehire. That almost made me laugh. Almost. At 2:17 p.m., I received a formal email from Clive. Subject: Urgent assistance request. HelixNet infrastructure. Adrian, we're currently experiencing a sustained service outage impacting all client-facing systems. Internal teams have been unable to restore functionality. We're reaching out to request your urgent consultation on a temporary contract basis to assist in system recovery. Please let us know your availability and rate. Clive, VP Ops. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I felt the old instinct to jump in, fix what was broken, carry it on my shoulders like I always had. But then I remembered the look on Clive's face when he called me non-essential. And I remembered the gut punch of walking out with a box while he talked about lean optimization. So I replied, Clive, I'm available for emergency consultation. My rate is $900 per hour, 5-hour minimum, prepaid via contract with no liability for service outcomes. Additionally, I require a written acknowledgement from the executive team that I was the architect of the systems now in failure, and that proper knowledge transfer was not conducted prior to my dismissal. If that's acceptable, I'll provide you with a list of diagnostics to run immediately. Adrian. Eva, my lawyer, reviewed the contract within the hour. HelixNet signed it without hesitation. Desperation is the great equalizer. By 4 p.m., I was dialed into a live Slack Connect channel with Grace, Nadia, Lucas, 2 frantic DevOps contractors, and Clive himself. The channel was pure panic. Lucas, Takis, Dev. We tried a cold reboot, but pods didn't re-init the authoring contractor. Chas Hauthi, Bootstrap is 404ing. Nadia P, salt keys are gone. We can't re-encrypt tokens. Clive Ops, Adrian, can you help us isolate this? I took a deep breath, typed slowly. Adrian Vu, first, stop all attempts to manually restart the containers. Adrian Vu, second, check for on the fallback container in. Grace B, found it, timestamped 2 weeks before you left. Adrian Vu, good. That backup was scheduled to run every 72 hours. Unless someone disabled the cron job. Lucas Dev, I disabled it. Thought it was legacy noise. Adrian Vu, it was the only thing keeping your auth layer alive. Within 40 minutes, I had walked them through, restoring the last known good token backup, reinitializing the auth salt using a preserved key, redirecting user sessions to a temporary login page with refreshed tokens, rebooting the queue system without triggering the watchdog that would wipe cache stores. By 6:12 p.m., internal systems were stabilizing. By 6:27 p.m., the login page came back online. By 6:41 p.m., the first client posted this on Twitter. Looks like at HelixNet is back, finally. That night, Clive called. Personally. Adrian, I just wanted to say thank you. That was incredible. You're welcome. I don't know how we missed so much of this. I paused. Yep, you didn't miss it. You deleted it. Silence, then. Would you consider coming back? Maybe in a leadership role? I almost laughed. No, Clive, you don't need me full time. But you need to learn how to respect the systems you inherit and the people who build them. I ended the call. By the time I shut down my laptop, HelixNet's system was limping but alive. But the message was clear. They hadn't just cut a salary, they'd cut out resilience. And for 4 days, the world saw what happened next. By dawn the next day, HelixNet was running again. Barely. The servers were upright, sessions were stable, and customers could finally log in. But inside the company, the narrative was cracking. Someone had leaked a screenshot of the internal Slack war room. My message, the one about the cron job backup Lucas disabled, was right there, time-stamped, highlighted, and making the rounds on a tech forum with 120,000 views by breakfast. The thread title? They've fired the guy who built the system. Guess who they had to call to fix it? I didn't post it, but I didn't take it down either. By noon, 3 more media outlets had picked up the story, complete with anonymized interviews from employees calling the outage a preventable disaster. They were right. It was preventable. All of it. If they had just listened. Clive emailed me again. This time, the tone was deferential. Adrian, in light of yesterday's events and the need to prevent future recurrence, I'd like to formally invite you to discuss a long-term advisory role at HelixNet. We're willing to build the position around your expertise. Let's talk compensation and scope when you're ready. Regards, Clive. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I forwarded it to Eva with a single line. How's Chief Infrastructure Architect Emeritus sound? She called me laughing. I'd go with Ghost in the Machine, but sure, let's make them pay for what they dismantled. But I wasn't done with them yet. Before any advisory talks, before any title was considered, I wanted one thing first: acknowledgement. So I asked for it. An internal memo circulated company-wide stating that my system architecture had been foundational, that my offboarding was handled without sufficient knowledge transfer, that the recent outage was partially due to decisions made after my departure, that all restored functionality during the crisis was made possible through my intervention. At first, Clive resisted. He wanted to reframe it as collaborative effort, unexpected dependencies, and technical legacy issues. I told him no, and reminded him I still had every Slack log, every console command, every time-stamped recovery step. That I wasn't asking for revenge. I was asking for truth. And if they weren't willing to say it inside the building, I'd say it outside. Loudly, the memo went out 3 days later. Internal only, of course, but I had eyes inside. Grace sent it to me with a note. Not perfect, but it's something. She wasn't wrong. The memo acknowledged gaps in knowledge continuity, oversights in infrastructure transition, and though it never mentioned my name directly, it closed with a phrase I recognized from one of my old post-mortem reports. We must never confuse automation with understanding. They'd finally heard me. Too late, but better than never. That same week, clients started asking questions. Enterprise customers wanted root cause analysis. They wanted to know what steps were being taken to prevent another 4-day blackout, and some wanted names. One of HelixNet's biggest accounts, a federal logistics contractor, demanded access to the recovery timeline. When they received it, they noticed something curious, a 5-hour gap, during which, according to the logs, someone outside the organization had restored functionality. They connected the dots. One of their directors called me privately. I don't want to pry, he said, but we're reviewing our vendor relationships, and I'd rather pay the person who fixed the system than the people who broke it. That was the third unsolicited consulting offer I received that week. HelixNet kept calling. They wanted a roadmap, a framework, a name on a slide to tell investors the outage was over and the legend who built our core was back. I met with Clive once virtually. He wore the same crisp shirt, same smug smile, but now it sagged a little. So, he said, let's talk about your future here. There isn't one, I replied. He blinked. What do you mean? I don't want to come back. But you... I'll help document what I can. I'll consult short term, but I'm not interested in rebuilding what you destroyed. He didn't respond, so I continued. I built that infrastructure for a company that valued it, that saw reliability as a feature, not a cost center. The place I left, that wasn't HelixNet anymore. Another silence, then quietly he asked, do you really think this is all my fault? No, I said honestly. But you were the one holding the knife when the system bled. I stayed on for 2 more weeks, documented everything I could, rewrote the wiki, rebuilt the monitoring alerts with actual context, trained Grace, promoted her to lead, then I stepped away. Quietly, no farewell party, no announcement, just a private message from Lucas. I had no idea, I'm sorry. I've learned more from reading your commit notes than I did in onboarding. I wrote back, take care of the system, it remembers everything. A month after the incident, I sat at a conference in Denver watching a keynote on modern infrastructure resilience. The speaker quoted a case study. HelixNet's 4-day outage is a reminder that resilience is not just about redundancy. It's about knowledge, about keeping institutional memory alive. They flashed a diagram. My architecture, no credit, no name, just a shape on a slide. I smiled. They didn't need to say my name. The system remembered. It's strange, the kind of silence that follows disaster. Not the eerie quiet of everything breaking, that's loud in its own way. Not the scrambling shouts of incident calls or the fevered breath of panic in Slack threads. No, this was the silence of survival. The kind that settles once everything is back online. Once the dashboards turn green again. Once the customers stop tweeting angry emojis and go back to submitting bug reports. The kind where leadership pretends nothing happened. And the people who know the truth move on. I didn't return to HelixNet. I didn't need to. The ghost of me would live in their systems far longer than any of them realized. My final deliverables included a recovery protocol that mapped not just what had failed, but why, and how long it had been failing quietly. A training framework for the next generation of engineers, centered not on automation, but understanding. A document called What We Forgot to Respect, listing the architecture principles that once governed our stability. Ignored, deprecated, then rediscovered the hard way. Clive had asked to meet once more in person. I declined. Eva advised me to keep things clean, so instead I sent him a single-page letter with my invoice. At the bottom, I included a quote I'd scribbled in a notebook years ago. During the worst midnight fire drill of my career, infrastructure isn't the skeleton of your product. It's the nervous system. Lose connection, and everything goes numb. In the months that followed, my story spread. Not because I told it, but because systems tell their own stories and engineers talk. Podcasts picked up the case study. Conferences invited me to speak. Not because I was the hero, but because I was the warning. And strangely, that made me valuable again. Not flashy, not headline-worthy, but valuable. I began working with startups, quietly auditing their stacks. I started each session with the same question. Who here knows what happens if your load balancer dies during a database migration? The room always went quiet. Then I'd begin. Meanwhile, HelixNet rebuilt. Grace stayed on. She took the lessons seriously. She became what I once was. A quiet presence, invisible when things go right, irreplaceable when they don't. Lucas stuck around too. I heard he eventually wrote a full post-mortem for the outage. Transparent, uncomfortable, honest. It went viral inside the company. They gave him a promotion. I ran into a HelixNet client once, months later at a tech happy hour in San Jose. He didn't know me, just recognized the name on my badge. "Oh," he said, "Adrian Vu? You were with HelixNet, right?" "Was," I said. "They had a hell of an outage last year. Lost access to our entire dashboard for 4 days. Thought we were going to cancel our contract." I nodded. "What made you stay?" He shrugged. "Some internal guy told us they brought in the architect who originally built the system. Fixed everything in hours." "Huh. Smart move," he said. "Bet they hired him back at double the salary." I smiled. Something like that. There's a lesson in all of this, but it's not the one they print in press releases or the one executives post on LinkedIn after challenging months. It's this: if you don't know how your system works, you don't know when it's broken. And if you don't value the people who built it, you won't even know who to call when it breaks. I walk differently now. Not because I'm bitter, because I understand something most people forget. Infrastructure is built on trust, not just between machines, between people. And when you label someone non-essential, you'd better be sure. They weren't the only person holding the map. 6 months after the outage, I got a final email from Grace. Just 3 lines. "Production system stable. Recovery plan in place. Legacy watchdog re-enabled, with attribution." Attached was a screenshot of the config file. Under the field where my old script was referenced, they'd added a comment. "YAML. Adrian's failsafe, never touch again." I didn't reply, I just archived the email and finally logged out.